Art Bell.
So that would mean that you could sit out there and you could actually watch me if you've got a fast enough connection at 30 frames per second, which is television, TV. And so we are proceeding on a path to begin experimenting with that. John Kirby up in Portland is behind it, as is Broadcast.com, I guess Microsoft, and on and on and on. So I'll keep you updated, but that's coming. Now, in the next hour, I'm going to have Jeffrey Mishlove on. Jeffrey Mishlove, a doctor actually, PhD, is director of something called the Intuition Network, and he is a remarkable man. He's author of The Classic Roots of Consciousness. He investigated, he's got a new book called The X Factor, Confronting the Unbelievable. And he investigated a man named Ted Owens. And Ted Owens is somebody you're going to want to hear about, because Ted Owens didn't just predict things. Ted Owens caused them to happen. And that's what we're going to talk to Mr. Mishlove about. I'm going to update you shortly on the Pegasus story, because it is not over yet. There's more to go. And Richard Hoagland has it. And I know that a lot of you want updates. You want to know what's going on. Now, as you know, I am about to be the recipient this week, at the end of this week, on Friday the 13th. Very auspicious day to give me this award. And I am accepting it in this light. I'm accepting this as a badge of honor. It is from Psychop and the Skeptical Inquirer. And they're giving it to me in hopes that they will... I don't know what they're giving it to me for. They're giving it to me... Magazine editors say they're giving Bell the less than prestigious award for encouraging credulity, presenting pseudoscience as genuine, and contributing to the public's lack of understanding of the methods of scientific inquiry. The story will be Friday the 13th. Won't be lucky day for Art Bell. Well, I say it is lucky for me. I would like to note something, though. In my Snuff Candle Award, they list Carl Sagan as an active member now. I wonder what it is that Psychop and the Skeptical Inquirer are doing to continue to consult with Carl, because actually Carl has been, bless his heart, dispersing his billions and billions of tiny atomic particles to the daisies for quite a while now. So unless they have some sort of communication going that I'm not aware of, the people at Psychop and the Skeptical Inquirer, maybe you don't suppose they sneak into some sort of strange secret session with a psychic and still consult with Carl and let him vote to you. Oh well. Friday's the big day, folks. The Snarled Candle Award is going to be mine. All mine. Grim. You indeed have connected with a weird program. Middlebury, Vermont. 1490 on the dial, serving the regional area there. Glad to have you on board. Just wait till you hear what we do. Standard news. Gingrich says he quit for GOP unity. Did it for party. Said tonight he decided to retire rather than fight for a new term last week because his presence would be, quote, an excuse for divisiveness and factionalism among Republicans. Really? I thought there was no such thing among Republicans. All right. Churches get anthrax threats. So this mess continues. Indianapolis. Letters claiming to contain anthrax were sent today to a Catholic parish in Indianapolis, a church in suburban Buffalo, New York, and a Chicago office of an anti-abortion group. letters were under investigation, so this seems to be a new thing. I got one, they had it in Wichita, and now all of a sudden this seems to be the latest rage. Send somebody some powder and tell them they've just been exposed to anthrax. Not very funny, of course, when you get such a letter. House impeachment investigators are weighing whether to call presidential confidant Bruce Lindsay now that the Supreme Court has said it's okay to do that, as well as the Secret Service. So we'll see. In a moment, we're going to turn our attention to the Pegasus story, which is far from over now. If you didn't hear it, Linda had an interesting interview on Dreamland yesterday. I think it's I got some email from Paul Dorr, and I have invited Paul onto the program. He's welcome to come on, and he is, as you might imagine, a bit bitter about this whole business, the use of his name, all the rest of it. And so he's invited on the program to say whatever he would like to say, but of course it has for some time been known that Paul Dorr, at least the Paul Dorr who's in communication with me, is not the Paul Dorr, or he is the Paul Dorr. I guess they stole his name, and that would get you very angry, of course. But there is more to report to you than meets the eye on the Pegasus question. I got a very interesting fact just before coming on the air that I passed on to Richard Hoagland. He'll tell you about it and where this story stands in a moment. Well, Richard Hoagland may have the Engstrom Award, but soon I'll have the Stifled Candle Award. So I can say that when I introduce myself. Here is Richard C. Hoagland. Hello, Richard.
I'll see you one Stifled Candle and raise you to brass for knuckers.
Why would you imagine that an organization like SciComm and the Inquirer here, Skeptical Inquirer, why would they have somebody who's already died on their active ward list?
I haven't a clue.
Do you suppose they're consulting with him? If so, I think that requires some immediate explanation.
An absolute investigation. Absolutely.
All right, look, the Pegasus story has everybody going, including Paul Dorr, who emailed me something of a blast of an email, and I emailed back and I said, you're welcome to, airtime. It's already been well explained, Paul, that you are not the person who originated this, and somebody used your name, and so invited him on air. He may or may not accept, I have no idea.
Well, it gets even more curious. I was sent a fax copy this afternoon. There's an email which has gone back and forth between Mr. Dorr and an unknown correspondent who is known to me.
Okay.
I sent him a series of questions. I'm going to keep the correspondent's name private because I don't have permission to divulge the name.
All right.
But they sent me the correspondence, and I think it's absolutely fascinating because after they establish in the first three questions, how did you find out about this? And he says that he was emailed by a friend of his who was apparently this FFPDSP42 program that he claimed that the ostensible Paul Dorr claimed he was using for the signal search.
Yes.
Caused a lot of traffic on this individual's website, a guy named Mike Cook. So he sent Dorr, the real Dorr, an email and said, is this the reason why I'm getting so much traffic? And Dorr ignored it. Then he got another email from somebody else, and he finally responded and then realized, I guess by the third, that there was something pretty weird going on. Anyway, my correspondent emailed him with a series of questions, starting with, what were your initial thoughts? And Dorr responds, the real Dorr, says, what the hell is going on? Must be a mistake. There's another Paul Dorr. Then saw Siemens Plessy, that's the British aerospace company, mentioned, and my wife's first name. Remember Helen?
Yes.
Time to investigate. Question 2. Do you have any thoughts on who the imposter might be? Here's where things get really cute, Art. Door responds, the real Door. Either some prankster, believe he is posting from shell.p3.net in the USA, Richard Hoagland backed. Yeah,
I'm surprised.
Door is claiming that I put this guy, this imposter, up to it.
That you did.
His email to a total stranger in the United States in his second question. Now, don't you find that rather intriguing? For someone who doesn't know anything about this,
Yes, I do.
single me out as the instigator?
It is strange. It is strange.
Well, it's not only strange, but it's suspicious. I hate to use the C word, but
Oh, no, you don't.
yes, I do.
No, you don't. This is going to take us back to last week. All right, ask probably Paul right now.
Don't you find that remarkable that to a total stranger he is accusing me of being behind one of the greatest hoaxes of modern?
Well, in the sense that he should be sensitive to false allegations.
Absolutely.
What-
Mr.
what
Door,
do you
I
think?
think he does protest a bit too much here because he himself has been in high dudgeon that someone would accuse him of this without ever physically calling him.
Yeah, I would think he'd be sensitive to tossing allegations of this sort about, since obviously somebody did him in, so you would think so. Again, I've invited him for airtime. We'll see.
Well, that came in just a little while ago, about half an hour ago, and I was very intrigued to find that right off the bat, he's accusing me, having never talked to me, never met me, of something pretty weird. Anyway, we're following the trail.
Yes.
Let's assume for a moment that Mr. Door is an innocent dupe, and that he and the Japanese amateur, Mr. Oka, and perhaps the guy in Guernsey, although we don't know that for a fact, are all ringed into this.
Well, as I guess I should explain to this audience, on Sunday, Linda did an interview with a Japanese ham who supposedly received this signal, and he denied everything in one-word responses. Now, it was kind of a strange interview, but
Very strange.
it really was, yes. But he did deny that he was a source.
I still stand by what I said last Wednesday. What I see here is a two-level plot. There's that C word again. I see a real signal, we'll get to the latest on that in a minute, covered by a proactive action to dissuade interest by amateurs and people who are not in the official professional community, who cannot be controlled. And the easiest and quickest way to do that is to put out the real signal under fake names that are easily discovered to be fake.
Yeah.
And then everybody says, oh, it's only a Halloween hoax, as Linda said. And everybody goes away happy that they figured it out, they found it out, and they can go back to real life. Meanwhile, leaving the field to the professionals and the real signal and whatever is going to matriculate in the next few weeks.
Yes, no matter how I feel about this, Richard, I cannot rule that out as certainly a possibility that if you want to turn attention away from something that's beginning to get it, you set up an obvious false story, hoax, and you air the fact that it was a hoax, and everybody's attention for a while turns away.
Well, we have some additional evidence in that vein. Remember I said a couple nights ago that I was looking at the, quote, Door letter, unquote. And we got to probably find a better name for this person if it's not Paul Door.
I don't think it is, but...
the prevaricator, the imposter, the hoaxer, whatever you want to call him. Okay?
Well, as I said to Linda on Sunday, whoever this person is who put up that Joe City site,
the coordinator
we should
of this
find... He should be found and tortured slowly.
shouldn't be found. How do they go on
And
the torture
tortured
part?
slowly.
All right, I haven't paid him yet. No, I'm just kidding.
You say things like that,
I
and
know.
they're going to print them as
Art, I don't care.
Yeah,
I've
I
gotten
know.
to the point in my life
I
where
hear you.
the truth or nothing.
I know.
I don't care what they say. I don't care what they do.
That's why I
The
don't.
truth is critical.
That's why I'm proud of the Snatched Candle Award, because I'm to the point too where I just enjoy doing what I do, and if they don't like it, who cares?
Anyway, we have people who are actually going to get an interview with Mr. Door. All right, he complains in this email to this correspondent that I haven't even tried to reach him. Well, he hasn't been very available. All right, It's been very hard to track him down, but we're working on it, and we will get an interview. Maybe you'll get there first.
Well, I invited the guy. I said, look, just email me back. He sent me the same email that you got. I've got the same.
Now that I know that he's accusing me of being behind this whole thing, I'm really fascinated to get some questions from Mr. Doerr, particularly because of his former connections to Lockheed Martin. But that's a whole other story, all right?
Okay.
Let me go back to what I think this all means. If we have a hoax covering a real event,
Yes.
then there should be some evidence of this in that last communique, the one that was published on the web before the website was taken down. Maybe it was a code.
Yes.
Well, I have actually now done about half of it, and it is a code.
It is.
In the next night or so, I will have it finished. We'll put it on the web, and then we'll go through it.
You mean the letter from
The letter, the final
hoaxer?
letter from the fake Mr. Doerr
Yes.
is, in fact,
A code.
and it's an exquisite interlocking code. I'll show people how they can, look at this themselves to check that we're not deluding ourselves. And it's communicating some very specific information. So we'll hold that for the next couple of nights, right?
All right.
In the meantime, we're prosecuting the technical search. And we have our own team ginning up to put a dish, in operation with electronics, low noise front ends and all that, to scan the frequency and the region of the sky where we think this thing might be, based on the last data point, which was Australia on November 2nd.
Yes, and all those dishes are now offline.
Big one.
The Australian big ones.
That's right.
But before they went offline, they did, they say, detect this signal now.
And that's on our website.
Again, that's right, it is. 30 minutes ahead of your time, we got another fact, which I quickly sent to you, and we'll cover that when we get back. How's that?
Okay.
Stay right there. Richard C. Hoagland is my guest, winner of the Extra. I've got the storage candle by the end of the week. I'm Art Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM.
This is Premier Networks. That was Art Bell hosting Coast to Coast AM on this Somewhere in Time.
See how good Art is feeling today. Maybe 5 minutes of bumper music bleed over after he talks to Richard. Maybe let it bleed for about 3 or 4 minutes into it. Depends on how many milligrams he's on.
You're listening to Art Bell Somewhere in Time.
Soon to be the winner of the famous Snorted Pyramid Award. Wait. I've never actually received any honor like that before. We'll get back to Richard C. Hoagland and the latest, and there is some late news on the Pegasus story. Somehow or another, it just moved on. Or maybe it's that I won't let it go until I find out what's really going on here. I don't know. All right, here again is the winner of a real award from Richard C. Richard?
Yeah, but you're going to get the snooker candle. I mean, come on.
I know, and I'm going to cherish it, and I'm going to take pictures of it, and put it up on the web and everything else. And, I mean, really, it's quite an honor, Richard, when you think about it, when you consider, to use the old phrase, consider the source. Anyway.
Okay, where do you want to head in here? We've got two sets of news. We have political news, pretty intriguing. We have technical news. Let's have a look at technical, okay?
All right, let's begin with the
Just
test.
before Eric sent me a fax from a gentleman, we'll keep him anonymous for a moment, apparently is a amateur radio astronomer.
But he does give his name.
Let's give his name, and we've already sent him a message. And I have my technical people who are about this early, it turns out. They're going to physically run over the farm, okay? So we're going to get to the bottom of this quick, but he has access to dishes from 6.8 meters up to 30 meters.
That's a big dish.
30 meters, roughly by 3, that's a 90-foot tower.
That's big.
That's as big as the big guys. If I'm right, this whole scam is to dissuade amateurs from weighing in and looking because there's a hard signal in the middle with no sideband.
Yes, sir.
So the signal appears to be analog, not digital. You might know analog is light. And what was the Australian?
No, he goes on digital, it says, is chopped at the top
Right.
on a 2 to 10 meg sweep, and he's exactly right. I swept that 50 meg just to be sure.
That's what he said.
Yeah, and so here's yet another source. This one is Bill USA.
And it's about half an hour from our guys, so we're going to get them together tomorrow. We have a very sophisticated spectrum analyzer that we have begged, borrowed, and stolen from some friends of ours to put on this thing. So very shortly, Enterprise might have encountered with this individual a very good confirmation. Now, what's interesting is that I just got a call from my technical person who broke in during the commercial, and he said if he plots between this guy and the other one going all the way back to the so-called Paul Doors original,
Yes.
it's a logarithmic plot. What does a logarithmic plot mean? It means it's accelerating exactly as a real probe would. When I drop something, I think we'll take a copy of the ball out of the door and let it go.
Right.
It accelerates because of gravity at 32 feet per second.
Right. If you drop it from behind a point, it would eventually hit terminal velocity.
That's right, miles per second. So if you're slowing down, coming in from distant outer space, interstellar space, if you put on the brakes, every meter per second that you cut from the velocity is an acceleration.
Right.
Just converted as a deceleration.
Sure, sure.
So you wouldn't get a straight line down to zero. It should be a curve, starting out shallow at first, and then getting steeper and steeper and steeper until the final velocity is killed off when it arrives.
Right.
And that now, with this next data point from our friend the other night, appears to be what the curve is turning out to be. This is getting pretty interesting.
It is getting pretty interesting, and he goes on, he says, normally we look at 3800, but it's child's play to steer the dishes. I'm fairly sure the 6.8 and 30 can look at, with authorization, full spectrum. We're located in a part of the San Fernando Valley that is perfect for looking at low KW hard-to-find transmission, so KW band transmission. So, you know, this guy obviously knows what he's talking about, and we'll follow up. But that is a technical point to note for everybody. And as far as we know, Richard, the Australian contact still stands, doesn't
The
it?
Australian contact stands, and what makes it so interesting is that it's out of the country. And it was linked to Seth Shostak's website, the SETI Institute website.
Right.
There is another thing on the website which I must call your attention to.
right.
Seth has been posting with updates every couple of days
You mean on the SETI side?
on the SETI site, the official SETI Institute site, which is housed physically at the NASA Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California, south of San Francisco. And Dr. Seth Shostak is the director.
Yes.
They started out as an official NASA project until NASA killed the funding.
Right.
And they have now been going on private funding, and that's why they call the project Project Phoenix, because they rose from the ashes with new money, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Seth has done something pretty strange. He has listed me on his official chronology of this whole story
On the SETI side.
on the SETI site, and it's in a way that frankly is politically incorrect if you're in NASA. Now, every night when I come on, you make this big thing about all the pictures and the genuflection and all that, right?
You mean your portrait hanging in the halls of
Candles
NASA?
around it, stuffed candles, and all right.
Yes.
Well, it's coming true. Listen to what Seth says. On November 4, all the web postings of the EQ data and descriptions of the claim detection were removed and replaced by a national security weapon emblem. And as a number 5, by an inverted American flag,
Yep.
a UN flag, and a flag of Earth.
Yeah.
The initials RCH also appear on the bottom of the graphic, presumably a reference to Richard C. Hoagland, a scientist/journalist who maintains that the EQ PEG signal announcement is a disinformation plot to hide a real detection. Now, what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with it is this is in the same agency, which to this day will die rather than admit my work on Europa,
I know.
my work on the Pioneer 10 plaque, my work on the hammer and feather drop by David Scott on the moon, my work, in other words, they have gone out of their way to try to bury me.
I know.
And suddenly, Dr. Shostak, in a very forthright, very neutral mechanism, not only lists my credentials, but also the theory I am proposing, which is that this whole hoopla is a cover to mask a real event coming. Why would he do that?
Well, maybe because Seth is a fair and reasonable person, and he is. You know, I've interviewed him quite a number of times, and he's a very, very nice guy.
Okay, there's another political development. Over on the SETI League website, remember the one run by Dr. Shu
Oh, yes.
in New Jersey?
Oh, yes.
Which has gone into such hyperbole as this whole thing has set SETI back 100 years.
Oh, it's probably had SETI more into... He's dead wrong, and he'll figure that out after a while. It's done SETI a lot of good. It's called SETI to the American people's
I
attention.
think he's already figured it out, and this is why. See, what bothers me, and the reason that I'm getting really kind of out there and I don't give a damn what they say, is because the between the lines, the chicanery, the lack of significant body parts is getting pretty like on the SETI League website, which took the lead in calling this whole thing from the beginning a hoax. Remember, that was the computer that the so-called Paul Doerr broke into to put his screen ducts and ask basically for confirmation. Remember that?
Right, but I'm protecting Paul Doerr, who says he's got nothing to do
Well, he
with
says
it.
the so-called Paul Doerr.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, on that website tonight, there is a very important guest editorial at the top of the page
Oh,
titled "Do LDEs Emanate from Alien Probes?" Remember, my model is this is a probe heading this way.
LDEs?
LDE is long-delayed echoes. There is a phenomena in radio history.
I know all about it.
All right, well, why don't you then explain?
Well, I've actually observed this phenomenon on 75 meters, which is a very low frequency in the shortwave spectrum. 3.5 megahertz, roughly, above that, actually 3.8. And I'll be damned, Richard, if, I run a kilowatt, so it's a fair amount of power, but I can say, hello, this has happened to me on a good dozen occasions, and let go of the mic, the pickle, as the CBers would say, let go of the mic, and I can actually hear my hello come back to me. Now, the physics of that, at 3.5 megahertz, you're not going around the world. Something else is happening, and nobody can quite explain what it is.
Well, it gets even worse or better. There are examples in the literature of LDEs, long-delayed echoes, that literally are weeks and months and years.
I've heard this.
Well, it is documented. My friend Duncan Loonan wrote a book documenting it, and it's referenced in Monuments of Mars. Now, remember I discussed Ronald Bracewell the other night?
I do.
Stanford scientist who was pretty neat in many areas.
Yes, sir.
His proposal was that LDEs were simply terrestrial signals that leak out through the ionosphere, all right, are picked up by an alien probe orbiting somewhere in the solar system and stored in memory, and then snapped back to us with a very significant delay to get our attention.
Well, it gets your attention.
That it was the first, well, I'm not talking just a second or two, I'm talking like days or months or years.
Even a second or two, because you sit there saying,
Well, a second or two, the echo would have to come back from the moon.
that's right. And at 3.5 megahertz, there's no way. That's reflected by the ionosphere, Richard. There's no way.
Where are they coming from?
I have no idea.
Well, there is this paper by a guy named Chris Boyce, who has a whole website devoted to the alien probe hypothesis, which everybody should go look. It's linked to our site, enterprisemission.com, or through your site, markbell.com. The point is that at the top of the SETI League, who've been frying the whole door story, suddenly we have a major editorial, a scholarly, carefully crafted editorial with substantive documentation on alien probes. Now, where do you suppose they got this idea? In other words, the underground art, the political underground behind this story is there's something there. And it's almost like they're positioning the deck chairs so that when it is confirmed, they're on the side of the angels and don't look really, really, really silly. In other words, they're hedging their bets. Why are they hedging their bets? Is there an underground in the professional community a la Australia. That in fact, like our friend tonight with the 30-foot, private dish, has confirmed that it's Dopplering in like hell, and we can expect to roll out the welcome mat on December 7th.
Well, that's quite a projection. I understand.
Technically checkable.
I understand how you're coming up with it. That it presumes, though, that the same linear deceleration continues.
No, it's not linear. It's logarithmic.
Logarithmic. At any rate, the same rate of deceleration continues.
Well, remember, we don't know what kind of propulsion system. I am presuming that these guys are pretty sophisticated, and they're kind of lolling along at 4,000 miles per second, which was some numbers we calculated last week, to kind of not freak out the mainstream guys. Remember, the UFO crowd is used to hyperspatial warps, ET, electrogravitic technology, UFOs that are zipping around the shuttle, all that kind of stuff. But the mainstream crowd, who of course are not listening to us tonight, they are still stuck back in rockets and space shuttles, and if anybody is going to call us, they'll call us on the phone safely from several light years away.
Well, you're wrong about that. They do listen.
Okay. Well, then
Believe me, they listen.
we're making progress. The point is that if this is staged, and we use that term very carefully, if this is a crafted approach, a first contact, we can get into later, who might be behind it.
We might be behind it.
That's one of the possibilities that we ourselves, the so-called secret black technology, the black ops people who have this exquisite hyperdimensional Tom Bearden, technology that we've discussed, that they could be crafting this as a deliberate ploy for reasons currently unknown. We have to consider that as one option.
Sure.
And that's what's going on in terms of what happened in England. Part of the decoding of the message is trending in that direction. I don't want to say too much because I haven't finished it and I don't want to get ahead of myself. But it will be a pretty interesting discussion when we finally get it done and up on the web.
Well, look, my attitude about this now is that I'm going to follow it until I find out who's behind it and why they did it. In other words, I don't think this was some Orson Welles after 60 years
Not Frank, not Halloween.
retry. I don't think so either. Here's something you should hear I received. Dear Art, you probably have come to this conclusion by now, but just in case, here's one scenario behind the Pegasi hoax. There's been a long-standing behind-the-scenes plan by the secret government, a gang, to stage an alien landing. The purpose, of course, is to have an excuse to bring about the long-planned one-world government. This plan was coming together very nicely with a projected landing date obviously soon, within weeks or months, and Danes was on the mark when he said the source of the Pegasi phenomena was a military base. Since there is no real radio wave, he tuned in on the source of the information being disseminated out, which is someone in the know within the military. This person used his genius to fabricate a story and use the internet and press to make it public. Very top secret, devious plot without exposing him or herself. Now,
well, this story, this scenario is one of the reasons why, beginning back in June, when I got my calls from my Pentagon source,
yes.
I kept dismissing it. It was just too fast. But there's something that occurred to me tonight. Do you know where they said the first landing was going to occur, which is why I really dismissed it? Mountain View, California.
Mountain View.
Which is where Seth Shostak and SETI hangs out at NASA Ames.
That would be convenient.
So when this, we don't even have to walk across the street. So I laughed and I said, you got to be kidding. And I really didn't want to hear it because it was so trite. It was so cliche. It's so, New World Order stuff.
Yeah, I know.
But as we moved further down the road, and the source kept persisting, and gave me more specifics, and then confirmed the dates that we had developed from other sources, I began to take it more seriously, and now, of course, with this EQ-PEG thing, I'm taking it very seriously to the point where we can test it. We have now been given, as I said, specific lap long of the landing, and a date when convoys and vehicles and guys should show up to cordon off the area and all that. We've done our first aerial survey, and we're going to keep surveying and report what we find. And if we get to the date where things are supposed to happen and nothing happens, we will report that.
Okay, well, that's fair. Have you seen any movement to date?
No, but it's too early. It's too too early.
All right. By the way, Richard, you have got to call the phone company and find out if they can determine the source of this noise on your line.
Oh, someone faxed me a note the other night and said it was code. They wanted to know if I wanted help in decoding it. You know, like Morse code, long, short,
No,
long, short.
it's not. I can't hear any code there. I just hear a sort of a, and I can't even really discern the frequency. It sounds like below 1 kilohertz somewhere.
It showed up only when we started looking into this whole EQ business.
Well,
And I won't have them look, yes.
I'm going to get to the bottom of
Well, I
this.
switched the other night to another line and it suddenly showed up there.
I do, yes.
Well, it cannot be interference then on the lines here because that line was absolutely clean before we went on the air. So it's somewhere at the central
So it is.
switch.
It comes up, and I really should have been timing it. I wonder if it comes up at a specific interval. Somebody can run this tape back and decide for themselves.
Okay?
But I believe it may come up at a specific interval. Something
That's the
strange.
other thing before we leave with this update. If there's any professional astronomers out there, undergraduates, you know,
Yes.
in the control room at 3 o'clock in the morning, that really want to make history, turn the dish in the direction of EQ Pegasus and listen.
Do you want to give them? Do you happen to have the declination and?
Yeah, it's 2331 right ascension within a few arc minutes, and 19 degrees 56 minutes declination. That's plus 19.5 in declination, which is angle above the
Sure.
equator.
So if there's anybody out there with the capability, for heaven's sakes, folks, let's find out what's going on here. 23 minutes, 23 hours, 31 minutes.
Yep.
Right ascension, 19 minutes, 19 hours, 56 minutes declination.
But any decent scope will have a degree or two beam width, so if you're close to EQ Pegasi, you'll get it because it appears to be
Very strong. It's whatever it is. It's a per thump signal.
Yep. And our guy tonight confirmed that you're now able to pick it up on good amateur equipment, and I don't think he's part of La Voix. We'll find out.
Find out. This story is interesting no matter which way it goes now, and I'm going to stay on it till I find who began all this.
Well, congratulations on your screwed can. Your
That's good, actually. The screw can work. I appreciate that, Richard. Thank you. And take care. And we'll do an update as they are warranted. But we're going to stay on this until we figure out what's going on, who did it, and when we get them, we'll shove a bamboo up their fingernails. And if that doesn't work, we'll try torture. And we'll be right back.
Right back in time continues with Art Bell hosting Coast to Coast AM. More somewhere in time. Three-year network presents Art Bell somewhere in time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM on November 9th, 1998.
Good morning, everybody. In the first hour, we heard again from Richard C. Hoagland, the winner of the Eggs Program, along with myself, of course, winner of the Distortion Candle Award shortly, on the Pegasus situation. And it continues to be intriguing and filled with the C word. And we've got more records of signals that we're investigating now. And we got an email from Paul Dorr, and I had invited Paul Dorr on the program. He absolutely says he did not do any of it, and of course we pretty much know that's true now. Sunday, Linda Moulton interviewed the Japanese hand who denied any knowledge whatsoever of anything to do with the Pegasus story. The Australian signal remains. Harvard had anomalies that they didn't specify, and so we're staying on the story like glue until we finally find out who did it, why, and whether there's really a signal or not. In a moment, we've got a guest coming up that I think you're really going to enjoy. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Michelin. I guess that's how it's pronounced. We'll find out in a moment. This Week in Moment, Dr. Jeffrey Michelot. Tomorrow night, Paul Labattez, and I'm probably slaughtering his name, and he's written a book called and the Science of Continuous Creation, as well as Earth Under Fire, Humanity's Survival of the Apocalypse. Then the next night, that would be Wednesday night, David Icke will be here. A lot of people have been waiting for him. And The Truth Shall Set You Free, Heal the World, Do-It-Yourself Guide to Personal and Planetary Transformation, and Robots Rebellion, the story of the spiritual renaissance. Then Thursday night, Friday morning, Dr. Raymond Moody. You should know him. Life After Life. He's written book after book. Reflections on Life After Life, The Life Beyond, and on and on and on. Book very published. And then, of course, Friday night, Saturday morning, it'll be Major Cytex, Major Ed Dames. Now, however, comes Jeffrey Michelot, doctor. He serves as director of the Intuition Network, a non-profit organization of individuals in business, government, health, science, and education who are interested in cultivating and applying intuitive skills. The Intuition Network operates a computer conference and also sponsors the Sacred Sites School of Conscious Evolution, which will be hosting a program in Egypt during the spring equinox next year. Jeffrey is host of the weekly National Public Television series, Thinking Aloud, and for the past 12 years has conducted interviews with hundreds of leading figures in science, philosophy, psychology, health, and spirituality. And there is a website for that. I hope we have a link up at www.thinkingaloud.com. They probably are going to be one of the next contenders for the Fort Candle Award. Anyway, he has the distinction of holding a doctoral diploma in parapsychology. Now, that is the only such diploma ever awarded by an accredited American university. He received that degree in 1980 from the University of California, Berkeley. He is author of the classic Roots of Consciousness, originally published in 1975, new editions in 93 and 7, an overview of the history, science, and folklore of consciousness exploration, which has been widely used as an introductory college text. PSI, or Self-Development Systems, a book Owens. A man who claimed to be part human, part alien, Ted Owens produced over 150 demonstrations of his ability to control large-scale events by virtue of his telepathic communication with space intelligences, in quotes, in other words, other dimensional entities. These demonstrations involved UFO appearances, control of hurricanes, freak weather conditions, UFO appearances, and a wide variety of other events. Here is Jeffrey Michelot. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Art.
Am I getting your last name correctly?
Oh, you're doing just fine.
Michelot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Well, you've got quite a history, don't you?
I guess I do.
How did you, as a matter of interest, even get bent toward this line of inquiry into that which we can't quite put our fingers on all the time?
Well, I got my master's degree in criminology at UC Berkeley, and I've always been interested in studying deviant behavior of all kinds, positive and negative. And at one point back in 1972, I made a real decision that instead of working with rapists and murderers at San Quentin prison, I really wanted to look at the positive side of human deviance. clairaudience, a psychic phenomenon, mystical phenomenon, intuition and creativity. And I struggled with it for months and months because there weren't really opportunities. You could study psychopaths a lot easier than the really creative people in our culture. And the truth is, I was guided by dreams. In fact, I was led by dreams to set up my first radio program, which started in 1972 at KPFA Radio in Berkeley. I found that just as you're doing, being on the radio like this gave me access to the really creative people in our culture, and that's what gave me the confidence then to go back to the university and set up an individual, interdisciplinary doctoral program in parapsychology.
People like ourselves, Jeffrey, who investigate this sort of thing, are frequently slammed about by various groups. Now, I'm sure you've heard of PsyCop and the Skeptical Inquirer.
Well, I see they're giving you this award, and I can tell you that those people made me a focus of their attack around the time I got my doctoral degree. They were instrumental in helping to spread the fiction that I didn't really get the degree at all, and if I did get it, I certainly didn't deserve it. In fact, I ended up spending 6 years fighting a libel suit.
Oh, no kidding.
Well, I'm happy to say that I'm sitting to you I'm in my beautiful home in San Rafael, California, which I own as a result of a favorable settlement.
Well, I'll be damned. And so you was it with this particular organization?
No, specifically, the libel suit was against Psychology Today magazine. But there were people behind the scenes that were, setting all of this up.
I see. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I plan on displaying this award like a badge of honor.
Congratulations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I really admire your spirit.
Well, as I said to Richard Hoagland last hour, you consider the source. And considering the source, I consider it to be a badge of honor. Anyway, we have so much to talk about. So much to talk about. I don't know whether to begin at the beginning or begin at the end. Your latest book, of course, is just absolutely fascinating. I guess I'll begin there. Who was Ted Owens?
Ted Owens was a fellow I first heard about when I visited Puthoff and Targ, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ at SRI International back in 1976. They're the people who did the pioneering research in remote viewing. I was doing my doctoral dissertation in that area, and when I went to SRI to visit them, they told me that this strange fellow has been sending them mail saying that he's the world's greatest psychic, and they're wasting their time researching Uri Geller and anybody else. They should be looking at him. And they ignored him for a long time, but he kept sending them these letters. And one day they got a letter from him saying, look, I'm tired of waiting on you guys. I'm going to prove to you that I'm the world's greatest psychic. There's a drought going on in California right now. This is in early 1976. He wrote to them and said, I'm going to telepath to my space intelligence friends up in the UFOs, and we're going to end that drought so suddenly and dramatically you'll have no doubt that it was me. I'm going to cause rain and snow and sleet and hail and all kinds of bizarre weather, power blackouts and UFO sightings in Northern California, and your local paper will run a front-page story saying that the drought is over.
He made this prediction when, please?
This was in early February 1976.
February of 76. Early February of 76. And the results?
A couple of days later, everything he said came to pass, including snow, which for people who are familiar with the San Francisco area is very rare. And the Palo Alto Times, right there where SRI International Stanford Research Institute, it used to be called, is located, published the front page story saying, rare snowfall ends drought.
You've done many studies about consciousness, right?
I've been exploring consciousness for about 30 years.
The Roots of Consciousness, you wrote?
Yes, I did.
So, I think we can have the following conversation. Now, here's a man who claims claim to be in contact with aliens. Maybe yes, maybe no. That's his claim.
That was certainly his claim.
Now, more than just a claim, a fact are a whole series, years worth of things that he did. And here's my question for you, and this kind of extends from Dreamland yesterday. I believe absolutely in the power of the live conscious mind. We absolutely have a power, and it has been documented in a gazillion different ways, much of which we don't understand. Is it not possible that Ted Owens was doing this himself, perhaps in his own thinking with the help of, or in communication with aliens or some others, but that in fact he was doing this with his own mind? Have you considered that?
Absolutely. That's one of the first things that I've looked at, and we would call that psychokinesis in parapsychology, or mind over matter.
You bet.
And there's good reason to think of that as a real possibility.
No, we've got major universities doing studies affecting random number generators. I mean, proving that it's real.
Well, it's still controversial. Even in the parapsychology community, psychokinesis is not fully accepted as having been experimentally demonstrated, but I'm convinced of it, and I think when you look at Ted Owens, it could be alien intervention, it could be some sort of other dimensional contact, it could be psychokinesis, it could be precognition, and I suspect very likely it's a combination of all of these.
Over what period of time did you study Mr. Owens?
I met him in 1976, and he died in 1987. So I was monitoring his demonstrations during that time, and I also acquired the historical records of demonstrations that he had been doing for about another 10 years or so prior to that.
Prior to that? So for better than 20 years, really?
I have records extending about 20 years.
What kind of man was Ted?
Well, he was a member of Mensa, so he was an extremely bright person. And he had held many occupations in his life. He had been a jazz drummer and a bullwhip artist in the circus, and he had had a knife-throwing act at one time, and he had been a high-speed typist in a law office,
Really?
and an idea man for a railroad. He told me, Art, and this is fascinating, he said that ever since he was young, the aliens had been watching him and guiding his life, and they made sure that he had all of these different diverse occupations, including being a parapsychology researcher with J.B. Rhine at Duke University in the 1940s, a research assistant.
Well, to be in Mensa, his IQ must have been off the chart someplace.
He was not highly educated, but he was very bright, and he claimed that the aliens, he called them space intelligence.
Well, you'd be better to tell me, but I don't. It was my understanding that formal education doesn't necessarily equate to IQ, does it?
I think it gets in the way.
Well, I'll let you say that.
Well, I do say it as a person who's had a lot of formal education. I feel like after I got my PhD, I went to see my mentor, Arthur Young, the man who invented the helicopter, and he looked at me and he said, so it took you 6 years to get this degree. He said, it'll take you another 6 years to undo the damage that the university has done to you. And I was horrified, but he was right.
But again, in a technical sense, a formal education does not equal IQ, does it?
No.
IQ is something that you simply possess.
You have it from birth. But let me just complete one point, and that is that Owens told me that it was important that he have all of these different occupations so that his mind was flexible enough to manipulate this complex symbol system that he used when communicating telepathically with the space intelligence.
I just saw a wonderful movie called Good Will Hunting. Have you seen it? No, you need to. It's about a young man.
Oh, the Robin Williams?
Oh, yeah.
I saw it on the airplane once with the sound turned off.
I see. Well, it's brilliantly acted, brilliantly told, and it's about somebody like Ted.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly about somebody like Ted. And it's somebody who just He explained it in the movie. He was, of course, brilliant, and the IQ was off the chart, but he was a blue-collar worker, and he just, as some people would sing a song or sing a melody or understand a melody, he would understand mathematical formulas, very significant math formulas, and he just had that talent.
Well, Ted Owen's talent was quite different. He is a man who could point his finger and concentrate, and a bolt of lightning would come out of the sky and strike where he was pointing.
Did you see that occur?
I did not see it, but I have an affidavit from Sidney Margulies, who is an attorney in Philadelphia, who observed that and signed a sworn affidavit. And I have another affidavit from a fellow named Charles Jay, who lived in Pennsylvania and observed the same thing. And I have interviewed both of these men.
All right, Doctor, stand by. We're already at the bottom of this particular half-hour. Dr. Jeffrey Michelin is my guest. I'm Art Bell, and boy, do you have a lot to hear tonight. You have pointing your finger and bringing down a bolt of lightning. I say it can happen. We'll be right back.
This is our network. That was Art Bell hosting Coast to Coast AM on this Somewhere in Time.
And the board operators out there and all of you in the audience might want to make note here. Prior to the live show every night now, we are sending down the line to our network affiliates 3 hours of the show from the prior evening. And I know a lot of you can't stay up late, so and will not have heard those 3 hours. So if you would like, if our affiliates would like, if you would like, you can contact your affiliate. And there is 3 hours of Coast to Coast AM available before the live start of the show at 10 p.m. Pacific time or 1 a.m. Eastern time. In addition, if you live in an area, now we've pretty much got blanket coverage across the U.S. now, but if you live in an area where you've got a local talk station and you're having a hard time hearing a distant station, you're welcome to call your local talk station and give them the phone number for our network to pick the show up, which would mean that you'd hear it very strongly without any fading. And so our network phone number, if you've got a piece of paper handy, is area code 541-664-8829. So again, 3 hours of Coast available from the previous night every night. And also, for any of you who would like your local radio station, which is not now carrying the program, to do so, area code 541-664-8829. Now, with that, back to Dr. Jeffrey Michelin. So he pointed his finger and what else was he able to do?
Well, I was really intrigued when I met him about a case I found in the files where he had predicted that he would cause a UFO appearance. And this, in fact, happened. That case was monitored by Dr. Max Vogel, who happened to be the director of education for Mensa. And I had a letter on Mensa stationery from Max Vogel saying that this UFO appeared over Chase City, Virginia, within the specified time and space parameters that Owens had said. And interestingly enough, the first person who saw it was a police dispatcher named Marion Owen. That was another one of his trademarks, is that oftentimes in these demonstrations there would be another person with a similar name involved, and it was witnessed by a policeman for about 15 minutes, hovering back and forth over this town, going in different directions, and then it flew away. So that seemed to me to be the very best evidence that he really was in touch with aliens associated with UFOs, as he claimed to be. And so I asked him if he could produce a sighting like that for me.
Doctor, we've got... Oh, you did?
And we achieved one of the best attested UFO sightings in history as a result of that.
That would be...
It's not a famous sighting, but it was witnessed by over 100 people here in Northern California. It was videotaped. The videotape was broadcast on the local news here, and it was photographed, and the photograph appeared on the front page of a local newspaper. All of these things Owens predicted.
All right. I've got to run something by you here. I don't know if you're a listener to this program or normally up late, so I will assume that you probably have missed it. We did 5 mass experiments involving the weather. And without boring you to death, we did one in Texas where there was a severe drought. And we had people concentrate, millions of people, I have millions of listeners, a mass concentration trying to actually visualize condensation and the beginning of clouds and rain from Texas. Within 24 hours, it rained. Then we tried it in Florida, where they had additional troubles. They had fires going on. And bingo, again, within 24 hours, actually less, rain where there should not have been and was not forecast to be rain. We did it in British Columbia. We did 2 other experiments involving UFOs, one in which we asked for UFOs to appear, and within 2 weeks they did over Phoenix, the now famous Phoenix sightings.
Really?
Oh, yes, sir. And then people began to suggest to me to get wilder and wilder and try experiments with diverting the course of hurricanes. And after 5 successes, Doctor, it began to scare me. From several points of view, I'm still not exactly sure of what we're doing, whether it's the right thing to be doing, whether it's wrong to be fooling with Mother Nature. I imagine something horrible happening, like a hurricane being diverted back out to the water where it would grow from a Category 2 to a Category 5 and then slam on shore, and we'd get blamed. I imagined all kinds of possibilities, and so I just stopped it cold, and I haven't done it now in about 2 or 3 months. And I'm considering the implications of it. Do you think that if one mind has some power to do as we have been discussing with the record of Mr. Owens, that millions of minds collectively would have more power?
Well, I don't know if they would have more or not, because Ted Owens was really extraordinary, but perhaps as much power as he had. It would be very interesting, Art, to get together and compare notes, because I have been troubled by the ethical implications of this sort of work for 10 years or more. It's been over 20 since I got first involved, and for a long time I didn't even discuss this research with anybody, because even the most sophisticated of my colleagues in the parapsychology and UFO communities became frightened or went into denial when I began presenting my data to them. So I really want to compliment you on having ventured into this area, and I think it's a credit to the day and age in which we live that you and I can be having a calm, rational discussion about these kinds of phenomena. When I started 20 years ago, it wasn't possible to do that.
Well, it is today in a venue like this, and for that I'm very thankful again. Now, there were 5, and there was yet a second UFO appearance over Las Vegas. which we produced, and that occurred within 2 days of the experiment. My audience would be, I'm sure, glad to tell you about all of this. It was just absolutely astounding, but I'm still not comfortable with it.
I think you have good reason to be uncomfortable, and I can tell you many, many cases that I observed with Ted Owens that were harmful and dangerous. There were forest fires. There were people who committed suicide. There were airplanes that got knocked out of the sky by lightning bolts. There was, frankly, the Challenger disaster.
The Challenger disaster?
Yes.
You want to run that one by me?
Well, I received a telephone call from Owens in December 1985, and I had been receiving many calls from him. You see, he actually at one point declared war against the United States government, and many of the space flights and military exercises were plagued by all sorts of lightning attacks and poltergeist type of phenomenon. And he called me in December, near practically New Year's in 1985, and he said to me, Jeffrey, this may be the most important phone call you will ever receive. You have to get a hold of NASA. You have to warn them not to send that shuttle into space, because he said it's not me doing it this time, but the space intelligences of their own accord are going to knock it out of the sky. I didn't take him seriously then.
Yeah, I can understand. I can only imagine what it must have been like for you to sit there that late morning and watch the shuttle go up and explode. You must have done some serious sitting down and thinking.
My heart sank, and I was very disturbed, but ultimately it led me to realize that I had been neglecting Ted Owens for too long. I was so uncomfortable with, his war against the U.S. government.
What was that all about? I mean, he had some sort of grudge?
He wanted the U.S. government to pay for him to set up a base and to pay him a salary so that he could do his work. He just said if I was supported by the government, I would end droughts, I would end the Cold War, I would stop humanity from its headlong path into destruction. There's all sorts of good I could do, but because people did not treat him with respect, most people ridiculed him, he used to say, well, I've got to teach them a lesson. And so many, many negative things happened.
Do you remember a movie with Richard Burton?
The Fury.
I see you do. And there's an unforgettable scene in which finally, in absolute disgust and frustration, he goes with these intense blue eyes to the window, and there's an airliner coming in, and he concentrates on that airliner, and then the scene shifts to the airliner in the cockpit. Every alarm bell starts going off. The airliner begins to descend without any way for them to stop it, and plows into a skyscraper, and of course he caused that with his mind. Do you recall that?
Well, I seem to remember a scene in which a cathedral caves in, but I felt, when I first saw that movie, and it was some 20 years ago, so my memory is a little vague, but I felt like I was the psychiatrist who had been working with that character in the movie. I very much identified with that scene.
I thought so.
Very much so. It's the closest piece of fiction I know to what I really have gone through.
Let's back up a little bit. How would you define, you wrote a book called The Roots of Consciousness. How would you define consciousness itself?
Simply a subjective awareness. The fact that you are aware. You have a subjectivity, that it's like something to be Art Bell, or it's like something to be any of our listeners. That's consciousness. Awareness. Pure awareness.
Awareness. Do you expect that, as you know, computer speeds are doubling about every 18 months, storage is going through the roof, at some point or another, do you believe it's going to be possible that a machine will achieve what you have just defined as consciousness?
I think in principle it's possible. Yes, and I know people who are working on that problem. On my television program, Thinking Aloud, I interviewed recently Jack Sarfati, a physicist who wants to build a conscious computer chip.
Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't know whether or not it's a good idea, but I suspect if it's possible, it will happen.
It will be done.
I'm not sure it's possible, but I think I don't know offhand why it wouldn't be. To me, consciousness does not exist in these three dimensions of space and time. I consider consciousness to exist in hyperspace. I think our brains don't produce consciousness. They're more like a receiver picking it up, like a radio receiver picks up a signal.
Yes. Hyperspace. I'm hearing about that from everybody, hyperspace.
I'm a big believer in hyperspace, and of course so is the mainstream theoretical physics community these days.
Dr. Michio Kaku I interview frequently, and of course he talks now of 10 or more dimensions. And so when we talk about hyperspace, are we talking about higher dimensions?
Indeed we are. I think so. Higher dimensions in the sense of more than these three dimensions, and they are real dimensions of space. Although in superstring theory they're microscopically small, still they're real, and there's no reason that consciousness wouldn't exist in those dimensions. And of course, as you look into it more deeply, there's many more than the 10.
Well, he alludes to that possibility as well. When we physically die, would it be your view that we move into, or that what essence we have, soul, if you wish to use that word, moves into another dimension?
Well, I like what you're saying, but rather than say that the soul moves into another dimension, I would say that the soul is already there. You and I are already in more than these three dimensions. The body drops away, and the other dimensions continue on.
Have you done any research into OBEs?
Yes. Out-of-body experience. In my book, The Roots of Consciousness, which I wrote as part of my qualifying exam for my doctoral degree in parapsychology, I really tried to survey the entire field of the paranormal, and so I could talk OBEs or NDEs or apparitions or any kind of paranormal phenomenon has been my love for many, many decades. And I've looked into all of these things, and when you talk about out-of-body experience, or you talk about a spirit world, or you talk about the worlds of shamans, sooner or later you're going to ask yourself, well, where are these experiences taking place? And hyperspace becomes a very logical thing to postulate at that point, especially since we now know that there's good physical reasons to assume the existence of it.
Is there, in your opinion, a difference between the area you move to in an OBE, or can move to, and where you go when you die?
I think it's quite complex. After all, in an OBE, in the classical out-of-body experience, you seem to be moving through three-dimensional space, but usually, after a while, you jump into another level. There's different planes, and you jump into what might be called a dream reality, or an astral plane, or a near-death plane. So it's as if these let's call them the astral worlds, or these hyperspace worlds, they interpenetrate the physical three-dimensional world.
In recent years, I've had several paranormal experiences. I had an OBE completely unsolicited, thank you very much, in Paris. I went on vacation. And I don't want to bore you with the story, but I was lying in bed, I was out of my usual routine, and without any buzzing, without any feeling of being paralyzed, without any invitation or notice, I shot up like a rocket up above Paris into this little land of ecstasy is the only way I can describe it. There aren't words to put to this, what I felt. And I was shocked, surprised, and I went whoosh back into my body. I woke my wife up and I said, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me. And I knew about OBEs, and I've come to the edge of them before. I've had this buzzing, and I hate it. It's nauseating. I always yanked myself out of it. But I had none of that with this. It just happened. And I I was so astounded, I woke my wife up, wasn't too happy about it, and I told her all about it. I know the difference between a dream. Believe me, I have lots of dreams. I wake up, nice dream, interesting dream, scary dream, whatever. This was not. It was not a dream. And I've begun to wonder whether consideration of these topics, whether thinking about them brings them on, opens the door that allows them to occur.
Well, I think so. It's very useful to have some kind of a mental framework, or at least if they do occur, you can think about it afterward. Otherwise, you might have just forgotten about it if you have no mental handle.
No, I would not have forgotten about this, I promise you. Even if I never had thought about these topics, this was so dramatic, so unambiguous, so I don't want to say life-changing, because I guess it really hasn't changed my life, except as I remember it, it was not an indistinct occurrence. It was an oh my God kind of experience.
I have had those experiences myself, and in my case, I would say some of them did change my life. And I think if you were to poll, say, your listeners, or do a survey in general, you'd find that somewhere between 50% and 75% of the people have had an experience like this at some point in their life.
The big $64 gazillion question is this an experience that proves in some way our consciousness survives death, or is it simply an unknown artifact of a living mind? Because I was certainly alive when this occurred. I was out of my body. I know I was, but I can't conclusively say. Someone told me the other day, well, that's as dead as you're ever going to be, because that's where you're going and beyond. I don't know that to be true. I hope that's true. Doctor, hold on. We'll be right back. Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove is my guest.
The trip back in time continues with Art Bell hosting Coast to Coast AM. More extraordinary time and you're listening to Art Bell Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM from November 1998.
Good morning, everybody. We've got a real expert on our hands, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove. Dr. Mishlove has a doctoral diploma in parapsychology. As far as we know, it may be the only such accreditation from an American university. He received that degree in 1980 from the University of California at Berkeley. And we'll get back to him in just a moment. Stay right where you are. Back down to Dr. Mishlove. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, anyway, we're dealing with some other side, they call it the other side, another dimension, and when you have an OBE or you have a near-death experience, you seem to sort of move through into that area and then sometimes back from, and it seems to be a sort of even looking at UFOs, Doctor, a lot of UFOs recently have been described as morphing. In other words, either changing their shape or virtually disappearing. And that, too, would suggest movement in and out of an area that we don't understand.
Well, I think it's fair to say that space and time are much more complicated than our normal conventional way of thinking about it would have allowed us to believe up until very recently. Now we have very sophisticated mathematical tools so that our mainstream scientific community is getting a handle on just how magical space and time are.
This man that you studied for so long, Ted Owens, how did it begin for him? Did you research that? In other words,
Yes, I have his whole life history.
All right, then tell us some of it.
Well, some things started from childhood, and he even came from a family where there was a history of psychic phenomenon. But it was really when he was an adult, in fact, out of college, and after having worked with J.B. Rhine, he began to realize that he could, through his thoughts, control the weather. And this led him to think that he was in touch with nature. And it wasn't until some episodes occurred in which UFOs began to appear around him that he realized that, or he hypothesized, or he assumed for himself that it wasn't just nature he was in touch with, but actual UFO entities. And right away, once it became clear to him that he could do these demonstrations, that they were related to UFOs, he went to Washington and did his damnedest to get the attention of the government and the intelligence community. But I think it's fair to say that they were never equipped to deal with a man like him, to understand him or his personality or his talents. And he tried his whole life to get their attention, and I think they must have a huge file on him, but they were never willing to work with him. I'm sure they would have considered him too much of a loose cannon.
Well, he does sound like a little bit of a loose cannon.
And I think of him as sort of like an American folk hero, larger than life, like Pecos Bill or Paul Bunyan. Can't imagine one of those guys working for the government, really.
No, you really can't. What was his personality like, aside from his frustration with the government and so forth?
He had a deep, booming voice. He was very articulate. And he could be funny and peculiar. When I first met him in London in August of 1976, he was speaking to the Parascience Foundation at Birkbeck College, the University of London, and he walked onto stage. He had a big beard and long hair like Santa Claus, and he carried behind him on the stage a toy wagon loaded with papers, which he said were the documents of all of his many demonstrations. And he was very arrogant and said that, he was here to end the droughts and to end the Cold War, and he was the appointed ambassador of the UFOs, and a British scientific audience was aghast.
Oh my goodness. What was your take on the man? I mean, after all these years of study, you must have come to some firm conclusions. Now, the bit about in communication with extraterrestrials, did you finally completely buy into that?
I honestly can say, after 20 years of looking at it, that I just wish we had been able to do more research with him while he was alive. I hope we can find more people like him, or maybe, as you've done, the collective consciousness of a million radio viewers or listeners. But I still hold, various theories, and I don't think the evidence totally supports any one of them. To me, it's still a toss-up. Something is going on, and I suppose the best I could say is that he was in touch with some sort of higher dimensional entities. In Jungian psychology, we might call them like archetypal energies, like the ancient gods. And he was able to produce phenomenon. Shaman can do this. Contactees can do it. We don't have a good enough handle on it yet. It needs to be studied more.
How would you advise me? You've got a doctoral in parapsychology. You're a good person to ask. I've described the experiments we did do to you, and I've described my reluctance to continue, and my worry, my serious concern about them. How would you advise to proceed?
Well, I think one has to be very careful, Art. I would be perfectly willing to sit down and spend an hour with you privately, or a couple hours, going over this and trying to map something out, because I think with your audience, you have the possibility of doing some really constructive research in this area and documenting this and presenting it to the scientific community. We could take it to another level, and I think it's time to do that.
I am prepared to do that. I just don't know how to do it safely.
Well, I am aware of some of the hazards. I can't say that I totally understand all of the hazards, but I think with any new area, to a certain extent, you have to kind of experiment and learn from your mistakes.
What do you know about, I understand you're headed off to Egypt pretty soon.
Yes, we have a program called the Sacred Site School of Conscious Evolution. I was in Machu Picchu last month.
Were you?
Yes, it was awesome. We take people to these locations we'll be in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid on the spring equinox, and it's an opportunity for people to really open up in the way, for example, that you just described, to have very intense experiences of a psychic and mystical nature, and then to come back and be part of a community where you can talk about these things and learn from other people, and so that the whole culture, in a way, can wake up and integrate these sorts of profound experiences that were understood by ancient cultures.
Doctor, is this your first visit to Egypt?
No, I've been there on other occasions. It's really an extraordinary.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
I was there about a year ago and got to actually lie in the sarcophagus up there in the King's Chamber.
I was there myself at midnight on the winter solstice of 1995.
Can you recall, I'm not going to tell you what my experience was, but can you recall what yours was?
I not only can recall it, I can recall it very distinctly, and I can tell you that probably 80% of the group I was with had almost an identical experience.
Describe it.
Well, for me, it was as if when I was in that sarcophagus, I was there with my wife. It was as if all of those tons of limestone on top of us melted away, and I was flying right through space, right into the stars.
I described it to my audience when I got back from Egypt as something I would have a hard time putting words to, but it was a total body feeling. And I still haven't properly constructed words to describe what I felt in there. And I got in there as a joke, almost a joke anyway. I'd wrap my hands up kind of like I was dead. And then I got surprised by what I felt. And it was very interesting. What do you think the pyramids are?
Well, I think that they were probably built as a chamber for spiritual initiations. They're not like the other tombs in Egypt, which are full of artwork. There's almost no artwork at all inside of the pyramids. So, and based on the experience that I had, and it sounds as if your experience was very much along the same lines, that these chambers were designed to awaken people to this larger reality. They may have had many other purposes as well. I don't know that we begin to understand all of the depth that went into the construction of something like those pyramids. But I think they're much more than simply tombs, and it's not even clear that they were tombs at all.
That would be my feeling as well. Not tombs at all, but for something else entirely. All right, well, again, going back, I think, for a second to Tenno, as I'm jumping all over the place, I can't help it. He actually claimed he controlled athletic events.
He used to sit in his living room and have 2 television sets going at one time. He'd be drinking bottles of whiskey, smoking cigars, and he would pick the underdog football team and then deliberately, using his psychokinesis, try to get the favorite team to fumble the ball enough times so that the underdogs could win. And for one year, 1973, this was monitored by Max Vogel, who I mentioned earlier, the director of education for Mensa, and Vogel reported that Owens was 73% accurate in picking the underdogs.
I interviewed a witch, very nice lady actually, not long ago, and I suggested, I have sort of a inbred dislike for Kansas City. I'm a big NFL follower, and I suggested to her, well, actually, I only asked her if it would be possible to actually hex Kansas City and cause them to fumble the ball. And even though we didn't proceed with it, boy, did I get some nasty email from Kansas City, let me tell you. Sorry I ever brought the subject up, but you and I have traveled down a lot of very interesting, similar paths. So you think that kind of thing is as well, if you can control the weather, you can control a sports team.
Owens once asked me to use the term the Owens effect for psychokinesis of large-scale events. And I'll tell you, the sports writers were always much kinder to him than any of the scientists he tried to interest in his work.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, even today, Larry Mandry, who was the sports writer for the Virginia Pilot in Norfolk, Virginia, remembers Ted Owens with a great deal of affection, and he arranged at one time to have the CBS national news team come down and do a news story on Owens' ability to control athletic events. I mean, you know, the sports writers could take it with a kind of sense of lightness and humor, whereas the scientific community was just far too much in denial or horror to deal with Owens.
Mr. Owens is now passed on.
He died in 1987.
And your book will come out shortly about him.
I hope so.
Where does your research go from here?
Well, I took Owens' training myself. And at the end, after the Challenger disaster, when I decided I had to study him more carefully, and it was right before his death in 1986, a year before he died, I decided to take his training program. He had been training many people, and one of the things that he asked me when I first took the training is why I wanted to do it. What did I hope to get out of it? And I told him my
That's a good question, actually.
It's the most important question that anybody could ask if they're moving into this area is, you know, for what purpose? And I told him my purpose was to be a more effective communicator of these realities, parapsychology, because at that time it had been difficult for me. I'd been spending the last 6 years fighting a libel suit, as I mentioned to you. I felt mortified, and I was just coming out of that, and I took the training within a few weeks. I started up my television series, Thinking Aloud, and we've been now out on the satellite to public television stations around the country every week for over 10 years.
Going back to my friends at PsyCop and Skeptical Inquirer and the kind of people that you had to go after, what do you think their motivations are? They're not just, you know, they describe themselves as skeptics, but they're not. They're debunkers, and there's a big difference, big difference. I would describe myself as a skeptic. Open-minded, hopefully not to the point where the brains fall out, but just open-minded and open to new things. They're not. They're very close-minded, actually. And what are they all about?
Well, I'll give you some insight. Martin Gardner, who was sort of one of the granddaddies of all the skeptics, wrote a novel, an autobiographical novel, in which he talked about how he was raised in a fundamentalist Christian community, and where the big thing was fear of the devil, and how he finally, you know, cleansed his system of fear of the devil. But as far as I can tell, it's just a very thin veneer. The skeptics, they're not afraid of the devil. Instead, they're afraid of what they call the rising tide of irrational superstition. But it's just, they're just as rigid as the fundamentalists in that regard. They're just sort of a modernist version of a fundamentalist rigidity. But I think, you know, there are moderates amongst them, and to some degree the skeptics serve a useful purpose in exposing a certain amount of fraud and in keeping the debate lively and sometimes keeping certain people honest.
Skeptics absolutely do, but debunkers, on the other hand, they're as bad as people who hoax things, in my opinion, because there's nothing subjective about what they're doing.
In fact, some of the debunkers are hoaxers.
Well, I'm glad you said that. That's true. I imagine my audience has a lot of questions they would like to ask you because phones are ringing off the hook. Tell me a little bit about the Intuition Network itself.
The Intuition Network is a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a world art in which people everywhere feel encouraged to cultivate and apply their own inner intuitive abilities, which I would define sort of as the deep wisdom of the soul. We sponsor a computer conference. We have, as I mentioned, our Sacred Sites School of Conscious Evolution, and we have a website, which is www.intuition.org.
I believe we've got a link on our site up to it. So people, if they wish, can go to my site, which they're probably used to, and jump over to yours just by clicking on your name. So, would you be willing to take calls from the audience?
Of course.
Would you be willing to take them on? What kind of subjects would you enjoy discussing with the audience?
You know, I think I read your autobiography recently, Art, and you talked about how you love to keep it very open-ended, let people bring up whatever they want.
Exactly right.
You know, I'm the same way.
Anything goes, huh? All right. Well, I must warn you that I don't screen calls, and so that's exactly what you're going to get is anything. If you're ready, let's try it. First time caller line, you're on the air with Dr. Michelov. Hi.
Hi, my name is Kim. I'm from Fillmore.
Oh, Kim, yes, turn it off all the way, actually, Kim. And tell us where you are again.
I'm from Fillmore.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get in touch with you all. Oh, by the way, congratulations on your Up to Snuff candle award.
Up to snuff? Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, I want to know, this is kind of a little bit different subject. If you have access to the Sunday Times, there's something really interesting. In the legal,
Yeah.
in the legal
The LA Times, right?
The LA Times, In the legal section, there's a, in what you would call, I'm nervous.
You're kind of cutting yourself off there, dear.
Okay, there's an environmental impact report from the Department of the Navy, and it's regarding the cruise missiles, and how they're going to start launching missiles over China Lake and starting in November '98.
Are they?
You really should see this. When you were talking to Richard Hoagland, I mean, it struck me. You hit right on it. I'd like to fax it to you.
All right. Please fax it to me, and we'll go from there. Thank you, and stay right where you are. Dr. Jeffrey Michelov is my guest. And we'll talk a little bit about the weather, because it's been so bad lately. I wonder if somebody's up there tampering where they ought not be. That's a pretty good question. It has been bad. We'll be right back.
The trip back in time continues. Art Bell hosting Coast to Coast AM. Your summer in time. Radio Network presents Art Bell Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM from November 9th, 1998.
Once again, here I am. A great honor to have Dr. Jeffrey Michelov here this night. He did 20 years worth of study of Ted Owens. Dr. Michelov also has the only doctoral diploma in parapsychology, we believe, in the U.S., and it was received in 1980 from the University of California at Berkeley. So obviously, if you have questions in his area, now is the time, and this is the place. Here we go once again with Dr. Jeffrey Michelov, and here come the callers, Doctor. First time caller line, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi, I'm John. I'm from Glendale.
Hi, John.
Hey, Dr. Michelov? Hello. Yeah, I'd like you to comment on a theory I have. I tend to believe from all the material I've read, and your book, by the way, is one of the books I have, that a lot of ancient cultures probably had these abilities,
and basically took it for granted or was commonplace within their cultures. And that eventually other societies came in, took over these cultures, let's say the Egyptians and the Mayans, and tried to abolish any of these beliefs and abilities. What do you think?
I think it's true. I would say that our modern Western culture is something of an aberration. You know, for the last 300 years or so, we're probably the only culture in human history that doesn't put these kinds of abilities squarely in the mainstream.
Right, and I would think that there might even be people today on higher levels, both politically and religiously, that are aware of these powers and maybe don't want the masses to know about them.
Well, I wish I could feel that confident that there were people like that. I suspect that the effort to suppress these powers is taking place at a subconscious level, that the skeptics and the people who are spreading disinformation, I think, are acting more out of influences that they themselves are not even aware of. And I suspect it's that we're about to experience an incredible renaissance, a flowering of these abilities, and there's a certain homeostatic principle operating in society to make sure it doesn't happen too quickly.
I agree with you on that. I think
So do I.
now it's far more acceptable these days to read about these type of phenomena and abilities than it has been in quite some long time. I think it's, I hate to say the Catholic Church, but they pretty much have held everybody in terror of things along these lines.
All right,
It's a
Caller.
preeminent belief system on the planet for quite some time.
Caller, thank you. With regard to the Renaissance underway, I absolutely, boy, do I agree with that. There appear, though, to be two forces at work. One is the spiritual renaissance you talked about, and the other is a very negative force that has children killing children and all kinds of horrid little things going on. And I guess there's a yin and a yang and a positive and a negative. And I'm hoping the positive is triumphant, and I have some reason to believe that it may be. So I agree with that, Doctor. I've had this feeling for some time that an event is on the way, a big event, and I don't know what that is. I'm not a prophet. I interview prophets from time to time, but I'm not one, so I have no idea what it is, but I think something's on the way, and events seem to be quickening towards something. Have you...
Well, my dear friend Gary Zukav, whose book Seed of the Soul is now #1 on the paperback list, and who was with me in Machu Picchu just a month ago, says that what we're experiencing now is the birth of the universal human. People whose allegiance is to consciousness and to humanity and to the planet, not to nations, not to religions. And this is a new kind of human. There have always been these people, the great sages, but now we're seeing it happening en masse. And I think that's a very favorable sign, but of course it's being preceded, as you point out, by a lot of chaos. And, I think the good news for me is as I look at the 20th century, I can see that the chaos was much worse in the first half than it has been so far in the second half of the 20th century. So I think we're moving away from the darkness into the light.
I hope you're right. One thing that hasn't had much light lately has been the weather. And we were discussing people being able to affect the weather. Now, there's been some horrible weather. 11,000 people just killed with Hurricane Mitch. And we could go back to the El Nino, unprecedented La Nina, which is now underway. Horrible weather. Is there any chance, do you think in your mind, that somebody is doing something they ought not be influencing?
Well, you know, in shamanistic cultures, there's been a tradition of controlling the weather and sometimes using it against your enemies, and that goes back for thousands of years. And Ted Owens demonstrated to me that he could control hurricanes with pinpoint accuracy, day by day, making them move right and left and up and down. There are other people who have observed him doing that as well. I have testimonials and detailed records on these sorts of things. I would bet, Art, that at some point when the next big hurricane comes along, working with your listeners, it might have been possible, for example, to prevent Hurricane Mitch from having caused all that damage.
I know. I got a lot of faxes of that kind, but just try and imagine for a moment, and I thought about this, and I suppose I'm chicken, but imagine for a moment that we had tried to affect this hurricane. Well, suppose nothing had happened, and the hurricane proceeded as it did. 11,000 dead. I would have had a lot of nasty email, believe me. So, before I move to something at that level, I'm tempted to try and verify this phenomenon with some lesser life and death matter before I jump into something like that.
I'm glad that you're aware there are risks involved, and certainly the embarrassment or being such a public figure as you are creates all sorts of extra risks.
It does indeed. Wildcard Line, you're on the air with Dr. Mishlove. Hi.
I'm on the air, huh?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, great.
Where are you?
Hi, Jeffrey. I'm from Alan from Reno.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're talking about the weather, and I just saw in the Nevada State Journal that 98 is supposed to be the warmest year in the last 1,000 years.
Really?
Yeah, they use tree rings and ice cores to indicate this. And I've heard that 99 is supposed to be even hotter. And I have a theory as to why this is happening. And it depends. A few weeks ago, I was listening to your show, and I don't know if it was a rebroadcast or not. Might have been when you were on vacation. But you were discussing about how the sun's gravity had increased and the speed of light had decreased. And, it was something to do with NASA probes. They send electronic signals back and forth, and the speed of light had slowed down. The probes were further away since 1987. This had been happening. And anyway, I thought I heard it on your show, the news item you had. But anyway, if the sun's gravity had increased, that means the planets are spiraling in, getting closer and closer to the sun, and of course we're going to warm up. So if we don't know the sun's gravity and how, I'm not sure right now what the sun's gravity is, if it's increased or, Anyway, that's a real important thing.
Well, we would need an astronomer to tell us if any of that was true. However, Doctor, we are experiencing, I think, verifiably warming. We've got pieces of the Antarctic breaking off. We've got ice flows in severe retreat. We've got all kinds of indications that there is a warming going on.
We do indeed, and I think if we're going to address the problem of global warming, it's going to be much more important to be able to change the minds of the billions of people on this planet whose habits are contributing to global warming than it would be to try and affect things through psychokinesis or UFO intervention. I think a lot of what needs to be done is education.
Well, here's what worries me. We are significant contributors to this problem because of our state of civilization, industrialization in America. Now, we've got lots of cars. When you go to the third world, I've done a great deal of travel, and it sounds like you have too. The third world wants what we have, and I don't slight them in any way for wanting what we have and wanting better things and wanting 2 cars in a garage and all the rest of it. But if they get it, we're dead. We're dead. I mean, the world could not stand industrialization the way we have it here worldwide. It's simply not sustainable.
I agree with you, and it seems to me that it's up to the industrialized world to lead by example. Since they want what we've got to show them how great it can be to give up some of those things.
Well, that'll be quite a trick if we can do it. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Mishlove. Hi.
Good morning, this is Kathy in the Big Easy.
In the Big down in New Orleans, huh?
Yes, I am, and got past Mitch, too. That was nice. Unfortunately, I did not send it to Honduras because I couldn't have lived with that. But I think we did do an awful lot of meditation, if you will, to make sure that it didn't hit here, because the total would have been much higher than that. I have some thoughts that I wanted to speak to Dr. Jeff about, but I have a chemical disorder, and sometimes I don't put words right, so I appreciate your patience. And God, Art, I am so glad we've got you. Seems like you're about the only one with enough stamina, along with courage, to stick in there with your program, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And if you have a question for the doctor, go ahead.
Okay, Doctor, I'm hearing people over and over talk in a scientific, physical plane, trying to explain things that are more of the mind, of the psychic, and I don't think that the two can be done. It's going back to a basic of we're spiritual beings in a physical body instead of physical beings with a spirit. And if this is acceptable, then more things will happen to the good, like what Art's been doing with the prayer groups and so on. If we can understand that that we know everything we already need to know, that the subconscious mind is in touch with our knowledge.
All right, ma'am, I want to be very careful. These were not prayer groups. These were mass concentration groups. I'm very hesitant to use the term prayer. It was mass concentration. If the Creator is the source of an answer to that kind of concentration, then so be it. But I'm not calling it prayer. Doctor, do you think that these abilities, the kind exhibited by the man you studied, Ted Owens, and obviously others who can do these kinds of things, do you think that we have always had these abilities, and that modern society and the noise level of modern society has simply sort of drowned it out, and we've forgotten what we once knew? Or do you think that evolution is handing us these abilities more consciously as the years go by?
That's a very, very complex question. I do think that Ted Owens, you might think of him as the Babe Ruth of this kind of phenomenon, and Uri Geller, might be like McGuire, and there's a Sosa out there in the psychic world, but most everybody can play a little bit of baseball. So I think these abilities are latent in the population, and in some cultures they're expressed more than in other cultures, and as we've just said earlier, we're living in an age in which masses of people are awakening to these abilities. Let me also go back to the woman's reference to the prayer groups, Art, because I think that may be an important approach that you might want to combine with the mass concentration experiments to bring in an element of prayer, so that people are not only willing a certain event, but also tuning into a higher power and acknowledging that higher power may have a wisdom greater than their own conscious mind, so that when people are, let's say, attempting to influence a hurricane, they might say, as some groups do, we want this result or a better one.
Well, at the probability of getting in lots of trouble, which I'm in all the time, I don't know that I delineate between concentration and prayer. They may both have the same end result. Those of faith will credit God. Those who are agnostic will sit and think about it. And I think I'm in that second group. I'm not sure from where this power comes. I just know that it does seem to be true, and I think you could say prayer is concentration. Concentration is prayer, and I'm not sure I delineate exactly between the two. Do you?
Well, it's a theoretical question, and I suppose, though, in practical terms, we have quite a bit of good scientific data, and your own experience seems to confirm it, that when masses of people all focus on the same positive intention,
Right.
it can make a difference.
Okay, Western Rockies, you're on there with Dr. Michelin. Hi.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Where are you?
I'm Jerry from California.
Okay.
It's really interesting to hear Dr. Michelin talk of Ted Owens because I was acquainted with the man back in the late 1960s.
How fascinating. I'm delighted to make your acquaintance.
Yes. Well, I wrote him a letter explaining an incident that had taken place in my home. At that time, he wrote immediately back to me and sent me 2 ordinary poker chips.
Oh, his plastic disc.
Yeah, that he said were impregnated or magnetized by the space intelligence. He
Yes,
called them
indeed.
SIs. S-I-S. And at that time, he also referred to himself as the PK Man.
Yes.
And at the same time, I bought a book that he wrote on how to contact space people.
Yes, I know that book.
Yeah, published in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And in the back of the book, the poker chips he sent one for me and one for my husband, and we were to wear them on our bodies at all times. And we did that for a while until something strange happened, and we put them away. But anyway, in the back of the book, he claims the book was coded, and each person who owned the book was in direct contact with the space intelligence.
Yes.
And it's an interesting book. I have it in front of me. I'm looking at it right now. I almost totally forgot about him. I didn't know he had passed away.
Yeah.
And did he stay in West Virginia or?
No, he moved all over the country.
Oh, he did? Yes. Well, it was so interesting. I'm so interested to hear you talking about him. And he was he was sort of strange, but he was also unique.
Well, I would very much appreciate learning about your experiences if there's some way you could contact me later.
You have an address? I'd be glad to write you.
We'll fix you right up. You go get a pencil and a piece of paper, and when we come out of the break, we'll tell you how to get in contact with Dr. Michelin, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And quickly at the top of the hour here, east of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Michelin. Hi.
Yeah, this is Mary from Memphis.
Mary from Memphis. Hi, Mary.
Hello. I listened to your show last night. I believe that you were talking about the commonality between like alien abductions and ghosts and
Yes, yes.
paranormal
Yes,
and
yes.
trauma.
That's correct.
And trauma, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, well, I don't, please don't write me off as a nutcase first thing, okay? I have been in therapy for 12 years, and I have dissociative identity disorder. And out-of-body experiences come very, very easily to someone like me. Because you not only come up out of your body, you come up sort of out of, you forget who you are. And I would like to know if he thinks that is related in any way to what you all are talking about.
All right, let's try it from this approach. Doctor, how many people do you think who are diagnosed with some sort of clinical psychological problem or even institutionalized perhaps don't deserve the diagnosis or the institutionalization? That question is going to have to wait, unfortunately, for the top of the episode to think about how many people in institutions really ought not be there. This is supposed to close to end. We're listening to Art Bell Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast Hand from November 9th, 1999. Dr. Jeffrey Michelin is my guest. Mishlove. He'll be right back. Get a paper and a pencil. We're going to tell you how to get hold of him in a moment. All right, here we go again with Dr. Mishlove. Welcome back, Doctor. How can people get him? I guess I should ask you, you haven't done it, so do it. Plug whatever book you would like and give people a way to get hold of you.
Well, again, let me mention the website for the Intuition Network. I checked your website, and it's not yet up there. It's www.intuition.org. Very simple.
Okay, do it again.
www.intuition.org.
Okay.
If I had to plug anything, really, I've got books, but I'd like to once again mention our Sacred Site School of Conscious Evolution and our forthcoming trip to Egypt, where we'll be inside the Great Pyramid on the spring equinox. And information about that is on our website. If people want to contact me directly, and I'd be delighted to hear from anybody who knew Ted Owens, they can reach me at the Intuition Network mailing address, which is 369-B 3rd Street.
Dash B as in boy?
Yes.
Okay.
369-B 3rd Street, number 161 in San Rafael. It's S-A-N capital R-A-F-A-E-L, California, 94901.
Very good. From Liz in Berkeley, your old stomping grounds, could you ask Dr. Mishlove to tell about his experiences with remote viewing? I know that his doctoral thesis dealt with the topic.
Well, I could say a lot about remote viewing. It's one of my favorite subjects, and that's, I met Ted Owens at the time I was doing my remote viewing research. Let me say one thing, and that is that I believe remote viewing is a talent that most people who are reasonably healthy, well-balanced, successful people can do. In fact, at SRI, Pudov and Targ, who launched the research program and were funded by the government for 20 years, every time the government sent a skeptical monitor, a government monitor to look in on them, they would convince that person that the research was valid by having them be the remote viewer. You don't necessarily need to take an expensive training program to do remote viewing. Most people do it very well the first time they ever try it. And usually the hard part is after that, just absorbing the implications of what that means.
My understanding of it was that the only reason for training was to, in essence, set up protocols that would keep your imagination as much out of it as possible.
Well, I tend to think that people, in my experience, do just as well without the fancy protocols. But sometimes people think that they need it. You know, what we usually tell people is close your eyes and relax. Give yourself permission at the level of your subconscious mind to receive information about the target. And then, with practice and feedback, people get better. But I don't think it needs to become a big production.
The U.S. government for 20 years funded research into remote viewing. Doctor, do you think, why do you think they ended the program?
Well, there's an article about it published by Ed May, who was a physicist who was in charge of the research in the latter years, and the program had deteriorated quite a bit towards the end. There was a lot of political infighting going on. The results had declined, and I think, frankly, the government people in the government, to my understanding, are very rarely are they sufficiently mature psychologically and well balanced and spiritually open to be able to come to terms with this. You have fundamentalists who were trying to close it down because they thought it was the work of the devil. You had skeptics trying to close it down because they thought it was irrational superstition. You had strange things going on with the people who were managing the program, and I think the government at that point decided to wash their hands of it.
I take it you have no doubt yourself that remote viewing is absolutely real.
Well, when you say absolutely real, I think it's just as real as Ted Owens or Babe Ruth was a really good baseball player. He hit more home runs than practically anybody until very recently, but he hit more strikeouts than home runs, you know. It didn't detract from his greatness as a baseball player, and with remote viewing, it works that way as well. It's not 100% accurate. Anybody who says it is, in my opinion, is giving you misleading information. It's like all psychic phenomenon. It's sort of probabilistic. Almost all human behavior is probabilistic in that regard. But the data is overwhelming that it exists. The books that have been written, there must be 20 different books now full of thousands of examples of successful remote viewing.
All right, here we go. First time caller line. You're on the air with Dr. Mishlove. Hi.
Hey, what's going on? I'm calling from Chicago.
Yes, sir.
I was curious. A few years back, I was interested, my whole life kind of in topics of the spiritual nature, especially with my own spiritual growth. And, there wasn't a lot available to me, so I turned to drugs. And I recently gotten off drugs, and I'm trying to get back more into it. But I'm worried that I may have done damage to myself in that process of trying to, find something else out there. And I was wondering what his thoughts were on that,
Well, you may have damaged yourself. I mean, there are drugs that can absolutely damage you on the other side of the coin at the expense of getting in trouble. Drugs have been said to be, by many scholars that I have talked with, a legitimate avenue of research into these areas. Doctor, what do you say?
Well, let's assume for the moment that you did damage yourself. That doesn't mean you can't heal yourself. In fact, in all spiritual traditions, indigenous, native traditions around the world, we have the shaman. The shaman is often referred to as the wounded healer. You gain your spiritual powers by becoming wounded and then healing yourself. So I wouldn't give up hope.
What about the more controversial question? I've had quite a number of very scholarly people who have suggested that drugs are in fact one. It's not socially comfortable to really suggest that these days, but there are a lot of honest people out there who say that. What's your take?
I've just written the introduction, a new edition of Timothy Leary's book, Tune In, Turn On, and Drop Out. That book had a big influence on me back in the 1960s, and I have to say, as I look back 30 years into the evolution of my own career as a parapsychologist, as president of the Intuition Network, I can say there was a time in my life when experimentation with psychedelic drugs was a very important part of spurring me along and giving me a real impetus to look at the deeper nature of the human mind and the far ranges of the human mind, and to really set me on a path of self-knowledge and spiritual exploration.
Well, I'm glad you said that. Had you actually been that long in Berkeley and had your doctorate in Berkeley and hadn't done that, everything else would have been hard to believe. All right. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Dr. Mishlove. Hi. Hello, where are you?
All right, I'm calling from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Yes, sir.
It's James.
Hi, James.
All right, I first got turned on to your program on my father. I'm pretty recent and new to your program. Been listening about 3 weeks now.
Glad to have you.
All right, and I was really interested in your topic tonight.
Yes.
Psychokinesis. All that is very real for me. It's like,
why?
Because it's happening. I think of it more as mental magic or creative visualization. Okay? And in personal experience, I've found things come true by my thoughts. What you hold in your thoughts, you magnetize into your life, so to speak. I've got a book here in my lap that teaches you how to control the weather. It teaches you how to have astral projection or out-of-body experience. A couple of books have had a whole lot of strong influence in my life, and this is one of them. Would it be alright if I say what books? Sure. Okay. The one in my lap is written by Donald Michael Craig, okay, and it's called Modern Magic, the 11 Lessons from High Magical Arts. And the other book is Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach.
Well, I'm not the mood of those, the doctor may be, but I'm tempted to say as a result of this that if you believe it works, then if you call yourself a witch, you probably think it's magical. If you call yourself a Christian, you probably think it's a miracle. If you call yourself a parapsychologist, you may simply think that it's the collective unconscious or whatever else you attribute it to. But I think it all may be the same thing. What do you think, Doctor?
Well, there are many different names, but what the caller is referring to is a very honorable tradition in American society. It goes back to Emerson and Thoreau and the Transcendentalists. And that kind of a can-do attitude is frankly one of the features that has made this such a great country.
Well, you get no argument with me on that one. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Mishlove. Hi. Hello. Where are you, please? Well, he just disconnected himself.
You know, I did want to answer the question of the lady who called before our break about mental illness.
Oh, yes, I said, I think I left it by asking you, how many people do you think are in institutions or diagnosed on an outpatient basis that should not be so?
And I want to say that I don't necessarily think very many. I think that there's a certain number because almost by definition, if you believe in these phenomena, it's one of the characteristics of psychosis and paranoia. But more often, I think it happens this way, that people who have had a traumatic experience in childhood, who have been abused as children, that creates mental illness. And it also creates authentic psychic functioning. So you have often people who are both very, very disturbed and are also having authentic experiences.
All right, east of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Mishlove. Where are you, please? Hello? Hello? Yes, hello? You're on the air. I hear you. I'm sorry. Well, try the best you can. Where are you? Largo, Florida. Largo, Florida. All right. Right. I was wondering, Dr. Mishlove, does he believe in people talking to the soul? All right. Thank you. We'll tackle that one. He's not Dr. Mishlove. Those are tires. He's Mishlove. Doctor?
The question is, do I believe in people talking to the soul?
Yes.
You could take that two ways. You could be talking to your own higher self. You could be talking to the spirits of the departed.
Let's take it as the second.
Well, I believe in both. Either way. I think, we each have a soul, and that soul represents our higher consciousness. It represents our deep purpose in life. It represents our larger vision, and we can talk to it like a friend, like a teacher, or a guide. And also, there's very good evidence going back over 100 years that we can talk through the agency of mediums, through dreams and apparitions with the spirits of people who have died. William James, America's greatest psychologist, experienced that and wrote about it very eloquently.
Again, I have to be slightly skeptical and ask you whether you honestly believe we're talking to those who have passed on, or whether we are talking in effect to our own information that it thinks we need.
Well, of course, every case is different, and human beings are quite capable of committing every sort of folly.
You bet.
So I don't mean to say that every instance of purported communication with the dead is that.
One would be enough.
But there are some very good cases in the annals of psychical research. If you want evidence for the existence of an afterlife, look into, for example, what are known as the cross correspondences, where you have one departed spirit providing information simultaneously to different spiritual mediums on different continents, like pieces of a puzzle. And the puzzle only comes together when all of the pieces are brought together, and you can see that there's an obvious effort of one very sophisticated mind to create this puzzle as a form of proof.
East of the Rockies, you're on there with Dr. Michelle. Where are you, please?
Hi, this is John in Houston.
Hi, John.
Hi. One subject I want to talk about, we had a lot of experience in this area, and it's got a lot of bad hype over here. It's just a good old Ouija board.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I'd like to ask the doctor what his opinion is on the validity of the communication that people are having. I've had some positive experiences with it.
Well, I think you can have positive experiences with the Ouija board. It's a very powerful tool. You can also, I know of people who have had highly negative experiences with the Ouija board, very real, that they just brought in.
I believe that's their attitude.
I'm one of the persons who's had a negative.
How are you?
Yes.
And there are people who have silly experiences. They just get in touch with their own subconscious. So I think ultimately the question isn't what tool you're using, but what is the attitude and state of mind with which you approach the tool.
Exactly. I mean, when I sit down and play it, I'm to the point where I can play on myself. And then but it didn't scare me at all. You're supposed to be able to play by myself.
Well, I caution. If you leave the front door of your house open, you can't be sure who's going to walk in.
Well, that's true. I say little prayers when I play it.
All right, listen. Caller, hold on through the break, and Dr. hold on. That's just my view, because actually that's something I wrote on top of it, but I did have one rather negative experience with a Ouija board that was left to be a very old Ouija board. We'll say more than that. Open doors, you never know. This is Coast to Coast AM. With the Premier Network. That was Mark Bell hosting Coast to Coast AM. On this, somewhere it's not. Jeffrey Michelin is my guest. Here.
Okay, yeah, that's what we
Detail, and you've had nothing but good experiences. Doctor, do you have any cautions at all? Or do you agree with this caller that you can do nothing but good if you know what you're doing?
Well, we talked about drugs a little earlier, and many people I've had use drugs for the purpose of mind exploration.